Hey, good evening, America.
Oh shit. Fail. Alright, go ahead. Go ahead, Jordan.
No, play the intro. Fuck it, we'll do it live. Play the intro.
Fuck it. Do it live.
Woo! All right, let's try this again. I am satellite internet delayed Jordan French, and this is TYT Community on TYT Nation, part of the TYT Network. We've got an excellent abbreviated show for you tonight, and I will be stepping in as a pseudo host. Tonight, joining us, as always, we've got our usual host who has decided to abdicate the throne tonight, Mr. Jeff Waldorf, working out of Michigan. And then, of course, we've got Sean, because somebody's got to be here to be wrong. And then joining us again for the second time, so glad to have you, Nick. Welcome back, man. It's good to finally meet you and to represent our international audience for us.
All right, hey, let's be a little bit fair. Let's be a little fair here. We're actually subbing in for we're all subbing in for Rhiannon, who is off on extended break. She'll be back with some new hardware, new camera, new machine. So we're all filling in for her until she gets back. So
she's climbing mountains. She's climbing mountains.
And
is she really?
I
That's
think
so
we can
cool.
all agree that we'll be thrilled for Ree to be back, because let's keep it real. Do you want to look at Sean or do you want to look at Ree? Come on. So starting off the round of stories tonight, we have a story, and of course it is the social justice hour. So we're gonna stick to that theme. We've got a story to start off that is as tragic as it is amazing. We've all heard the horror stories come out of Pakistan and a few other places of the honor killings that go on, and we've one of the most recent ones. Again, it's tragic, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We have a victim who survived an honor killing. 18-year-old Saba Masood of Pakistan was shot twice by her uncle and father, thrown into a sack, and tossed in a canal. They left her, presumed her dead. She climbed out of the canal, made it to a gas station, where she was rushed to a hospital by some first responders there. So far she's alive. Don't have a lot of details about her health, but this again, we've heard of these honor killings. As a matter of fact, in 2013 alone, there were 869 cases of honor killings in Pakistan. Now, this particular example, her great crime that caused her to dishonor her family more than apparently murdering your daughter in cold blood was marrying someone that her family didn't want her to marry. I don't know if it was someone just beneath their station or someone of a different religion. I don't have a lot of details, but obviously the big story here is the fact that after she was abandoned and left for dead, she, not only managed to live, but managed to bravely and heroically and self-preservedly crawl out of the canal and make it to safety. So, Nick, as you my first chance to work with you here tonight, I want to go ahead and kick it to you first. So, tell me, is this story more tragic or more inspiring? What's your take on this?
I would say a bit of both in different ways. I would say it's more tragic in that, I guess, considering it followed the other one so closely. I mean, as you said, 869 happened in the last year, 2013, so that does equal out to about 2 a day. So, I mean, chances are while she was crawling out and we're covering the story, there was another honor killing that did succeed or something, if we're going by the same sort of numbering system. But nonetheless, the fact that it did happen, that we're hearing about it so recently after the other one, is a little bit depressing. But the fact that she survived and managed to get herself to safety and help is also very inspiring. And can I just say how crazy a concept it is that you're you as a parent and your brother will conspire to kill your own child because she married someone you don't approve of. Like, how... I can't even really fathom doing that. And I don't even have kids. That notion of, I'm going to kill my kid because I feel so wronged socially by something they did. And to jump on your reasoning, I would be very surprised if this wasn't a class sort of system. I mean, last time I checked, India has its caste system very heavily. I think Pakistan might have some of that, considering they were roughly the same country for, well, a long, long time. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that some of that may have trailed over into Pakistan. I can't really think of why else it would be such a dishonorable thing for her to marry someone she loves, except that it was supposedly a person who, being of a different caste or class of people, would have shamed the family. I can't picture it being anything else.
Okay, so
well, it could have been religion.
A couple more facts here from from the article Reuters, which wrote a good article on this. Apparently, in these rural areas, these very conservative areas of Pakistan, marriages are still arranged. So if you have, like this woman, if you have the audacity to go and marry the person that you actually love, and still, instead of what your parents set up for you, that constitutes an honor killing, and to protect your honor. Now, for me, I think we can all agree that there is absolutely no fucking honor in doing this kind of thing, of killing your own fucking daughter just because she took matters into her own hands and said, you know what? I don't love the person that you're setting me up with. I love this other person, and I'm going to be with that person whether you fucking like it or not.
Can I just jump in now here too? I mean, and think about it. Think about the actually idea of honor. It's a very abstract concept of social pride and status for your family based on, I guess, behavior and adhering to status quo ideals. That's it. It's not like she endangered the family. It's not like she jeopardized it in any possible way, other than it offended an abstract concept of holding a status quo. That is all she did, and that warranted her father and her uncle trying to murder her.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
that's what's absolutely fascinating about it. It's not, again, not that it's okay to murder someone for marrying outside of their religion or their station, but her crime here was not choosing to murder outside of her religion or station. It was choosing to marry rather than having a mate chose for her. That was enough. And, this is a theme on TYT Network. Jank does this all the time. Libby McLiverson, we're not supposed to necessarily talk bad about other people's cultures or whatever. You know what? Whenever your culture sees murdering your daughter as the honorable choice over getting to decide who you marry, your culture is wrong, and it is okay to judge your culture. So, Sean, I want to kick it to you. I know you're trying to get in. Let me start with a question, and then you can get your point in, because I really want to hear your view on this particular kind of consequence of this, because you coming from a more libertarian place, your view as a foreign policy are going to be different from ours anyway. So Pakistan is quote unquote an ally of America. We have a pretty rough relationship right now, but at the end, if you are to ask, we officially consider them an ally. What should things like this, the fact that things like this are considered, whether or not they're legal, but are at least considered culturally okay in Pakistan, should this affect our relationship with them?
I mean, I think we should talk to Pakistan and talk to every country basically, but I don't want to give them money. I don't want to give money to the government that passes a law to look good in the West and technically makes this illegal, but never enforces it and effectively approves of this kind of behavior. But I think all of you guys, more importantly, are being very unfair to this Pakistani family. When they arranged this marriage, they accepted payment for their daughter, and now they look bad. So obviously, what else? What other recourse do they have except to murder their own family member? They made them look bad, and maybe they have to return whatever payment they received, and maybe just maybe the families won't be united in the way that they wanted. I don't see like any other recourse that this family had.
Sean, we should have let you go first so you could get your sarcastic jokes out of the way.
No, I'm not, like, in all seriousness, I'm not, like, I'm being sarcastic, obviously, but that's literally the justification. Like, your family, forget even your family, I can never see this doing this to another human being, but your own family is worth less than you, than what other people think about you, or worth less than you than the arrangement that you made to better yourself or your own family. Like that's horrible and disgusting, and if that's the way your culture works, then that aspect of your culture, as Jordan said, is terrible and it's wrong. And like I can never fathom anybody on this panel or anybody I've met in my real human life doing this to another person. Like it's insane.
Okay, so I'm really glad that Sean kind of clarified his point there, that he was only trying to explain their reasoning. Because for a while there, it seemed like Sean is the type of guy who watches Game of Thrones and then pulls for the phrase at the Red Wedding, which just confirms that Sean is the most horrible person in the history of people. Jeff, please do me a favor, redeem this segment and finish this out.
Can I just jump in quickly? Sean cried when Joffrey died.
Oh, spoilers!
Spoiler alert! Jeff isn't caught up, guys.
Thanks a lot. No, the truth about Game of Thrones is that you can't turn around, like you can't get on social media ever without finding out a spoiler. It's so fucking hard. All right, but anyway, back to our serious point, right? Jordan, you said, you know, we as liberals, we're not supposed to talk bad about your culture, right? About somebody's culture. Well, fuck that. Fuck your culture. That's what I say. Any culture that actually approves of honor killings, for the audacity of someone who marries for love, which is supposed to be something super, super important, right? Which is something super important. No, that's worthy of a death penalty. That's worthy of you being murdered. And that's what this is. It's not an honor killing. It's a attempted fucking murder. You are trying to murder someone. It's fucked up, dude. I cannot abide by that kind of culture. That said, going to the question that you asked, you know, Sean, what can we do about it? Fuck, man. I don't know what you can do about this culture. You know? I don't know what you can do about it. And that's the most frustrating thing is, like, you see all this shit coming out of places like this. But, man, and it makes your blood boil. But you can't, but what can you do about it?
I just want to make...
That's the most frustrating thing.
I just want to make a side point, like, after saying, like, there's really nothing you can do about it except hope that they change over time, like, you want to try and convince them that this is unacceptable. But I just want to make a random point. You know how conservatives always talk about the sanctity of marriage? Like, this is what a marriage was everywhere in the world for, like, years ago. It was an arranged agreement to better the families, where the wife was essentially traded to the husband. So this is what the old definition of marriage was. Like, our new definition of marriage, marrying for love, is relatively new. So, like, just something to point out.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I guess I'll throw this over to Jordan because he is the Christian on the panel who knows better. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is something similar within the context of the Old Testament of the Bible that has sort of similar punishments if you basically dishonor your father or something like that, and you don't marry who you're set to marry. Maybe I'm getting two separate passages confused, and if that's the case, I apologize. But I'll let you jump in for that and help clarify this.
Well, it's probably a little more complicated one than we can go in here. That would be a great little fun segment we could probably do maybe off air and then put up as a clip sometime where I can be a little more prepared. But you have to keep in mind that the scripture is written over the course of about 3,000 years, And so it depends on not even just whether you're in Old or New Testament, but which part of the Old Testament you're in. And there certainly are consequences to not honoring your father and mother, and there are consequences, there are rules about marriage and stuff like that. And one of the themes of the Old Testament is the things that are permitted in a marriage are not the things that Israel is supposed to be striving for, like the whole having multiple wives and concubines. Although it's presented as a historical fact in Scripture, it's always presented in a negative light, and that gets lost on a lot of people. But that's actually that's what Solomon is ultimately judged for, and why the dynasty falls apart in Israel after only 3 kings. But anyway, yeah. So that would be a really fun conversation to have. The short answer is yes. There is consequences to not honoring your father and mother, and people will point to a passage where it's stone the kids if they dishonor their father and mother. But there's a greater context to that. It's not saying you talk back to your mom and dad one day and they have a right to kill you. It's within a specific context, and there's a historical narrative behind that. But yeah, so basically what we have then is an ancient law that had this historical context. That even with that context, we today would probably say that still doesn't justify some of these punitive damages. And what you have now in a modern country, not only do you have that, but you have it pretty much being reinforced without that context behind it, to where these people really aren't doing anything truly bad. Again, I said it was a little complicated, but I do want to throw out an example. One of the things, like that the kids that could carry a death penalty or whatever was, for instance, marrying into certain non-tribes of Israel, or intermarrying with the people, and that was not because they were racist. It was because some of these other cultures, their gods practice like or their part of their religion was child sacrifice. And so the idea was whenever you married into that family and took on those cultures, you took on child sacrifice, so it had this real big punitive damage attached to it. What you have here is not that, right? This person is not going to go off and murder her grandkids, so the family's trying to preemptively stop that. It's just they're mad. They don't like what's happening. Do you want to have something you wanted to comment on there, Nick?
I did, actually. I wanted to jump in on this because inevitably you see it every now and then that I do know people who are very far left, and they would call it in some ways, not this specific case, but other elements of saying certain elements of culture are wrong. They would call that like Western imperialism and things like that. And so I got to kind of jump in because I'm sure this will inevitably come up, that someone will say, well, we can't tell them that their culture is wrong for this.
Oh, fuck that.
Yes and no. Day. Yes, we can. Yes, in a way we can. For example, I'm certain there was a case in Canada here, I don't know how long ago, probably a couple decades ago, where someone tried to perform an honor killing in Canada and argue that in his culture back home that it's acceptable and he'd be justified. Yeah, no, in your culture back home. This is Canada. You would hear, if your culture violates our laws, you don't get to do that. It doesn't matter what your culture is. You are in Canada. You are in our country. You abide by our laws. End of story. And I think that should apply to internationally as well. Now, there's a hell of a lot of problems with it, but I do think honor killing should be internationally condemned and written in the UN Charter of basically crimes against humanity. That only in that context can you actually have a legal basis for one country to say, hey, you should really do something about this, beyond the simple moral argument. It adds a further reinforcement, and I recognize there's a lot of problems with that, rightly, and it's right to point out the fact that Pakistan's our ally is a huge problem with that, because they are probably not going to be too pleased about that, and other countries that are formerly our allies are probably not going to be too happy about that, and hell, even some Western countries might not be too happy about that. But nonetheless, there is a way of getting it in so that we can treat this as a legal matter. It's just actually giving a shit enough as an international community to do it.
Exactly. I think that's an excellent point to close on. And so moving forward, we'll go ahead and throw our international audience a bone. Now that we've been judging another country and another culture, we'll turn the lens in on ourselves here and point out what may be actually a fairly parallel situation. where we have a little bit of an epidemic here as well. We've heard and seen multiple stories come out here lately about police who are called to help handle a situation where someone has a special needs family member, and the situation gets out of control, and the police, end up killing the person. And we've got another example of that here in California, where a 18-year-old special need girl was fatally shot because the family made the mistake, quote unquote, of calling for help. Now they expected. The family says this is a. Let me. I'm so sorry.
They expected to get an ambulance.
Yeah, well, I was looking for the girl's. What the girl's name who's died. Okay, so anyway. Okay, it's 18-year-old Yanira Serrano, according to Tiny Serrano, who claims to be the girl's brother, said that they called the police, the family they claimed to have called 911 to get medical assistance for the girl, and the police showed up instead, and the San Mateo County Sheriff's deputies ended up shooting her. Now, Tiny, the brother, tells a slightly different story. He said that they were hoping that so the Sheriff County claims that there were reports of a violent female suspect. That's what the Sheriff's County says. The Sheriff's deputies say. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling all over my words here. The San Mateo County Sheriff's claims that they were responding to reports of a violent female who they thought was armed, and that they ended up killing her based on that. The family claims they called trying to get paramedics, just somebody to help restrain her and get her some help, and the situation escalated needlessly. So they said they were shocked when deputies showed up rather than paramedics. Her brother Tiny says, she has special needs. We just wanted answers. Who are we supposed to call now when we need help? Who is supposed to help us when who is supposed to help us is killing our kids? Now, of course, the answer here is there's no one for you to call because it's too late. But I believe, speaking for other families in this situation, and this is not an isolated incident. We've seen this where we in America are so quick to go to police who are so quick to escalate to lethal force, and they're not trained for situations like this as well as many other situations. And we just see another, it sucks when it happens, and it sucks for the police who are in this situation and act poorly, but at the same time, that doesn't, absolve them. So my question, I guess I want to start off with Jeff. Actually, we'll start off with Sean. How about that? I'll throw Sean a bone and try to be nice to him for once, Sean. Since I know the police abuse is a big thing for you, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Tell me all about what's going on here.
Well, I mean, we don't know all the details in the story. Like, I'm being serious about that part, but it seems like the police treated this like they had better things to do, so they try to subdue the girl as quickly as possible. Like, maybe they did get bad information, but like, there's this new thing in the world where you arrive at a scene and you talk to people and you assess the situation and you move forward from there. And I don't think the police did any of that. Like, the fact that they immediately escalate to force, like, it's to such like levels of force. I get you have to restrain her, but it just makes no sense. And like, I hate to say it, but like, try not calling 911 unless you really need it. Unless like you really need it for a real emergency. Like, we've seen case after case where they'll come, and sometimes they'll even come to a house where there's a mentally handicapped person, and the cops will be good for a while. Then a supervisor will show up and he'll be like, "Let's get the hell out of here, wrap this up," and then they'll kill the kid. Like, the police, it's becoming more and more clear that the police are not interested in helping, or at least some section of the police are not interested in helping you or helping these kids. And it's like, these stories are awful, and it's awful that it keeps reoccurring.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty reasonable commentary. Jeff, you want to add anything to what Sean had to say?
Well, I was just going to say, we may not know all of the facts, but something that I don't know if you guys had mentioned is that she hadn't reportedly she hadn't been taking her medication, and that's why they called, because they wanted help, right? They wanted her to get some help from like the paramedics and stuff, from like to take her to the hospital because she was having like an episode, right? And you know, the Tiny, the brother, said, well, she may have had a knife. Now, having a knife is not a fucking justification for you to roll in with your fucking guns drawn and blow her ass away. That is fucking horrible, right? You shouldn't be able to do that. And so what you're looking at here is a definite escalation to deadly force for absolutely no reason whatsoever. She was a special need, a 22-year-old special needs, a girl with special needs, right? She was no threat to the police. None. She may have had a knife. Maybe. Possibly. But they didn't even go in there and do what they were supposed to do. They weren't even supposed to be there. It was supposed to be medical personnel. Now, I can understand if you know, in a possible dangerous situation, that the police will accompany medical professionals. That's completely, you know, that's fine. 100% normal, right? In that sort of situation, understandable. But this was just the police coming in there and saying, let's just, I don't know, let's dangerous situation, let's check it out. Oh my God, she may have a knife. Boom. America has gone crazy with our police state.
No, totally. And I think maybe a real practical answer there, and this is me trying to, you know, to give as much you know, benefit of the doubt as I can to the police, but also ask what I feel like as a non-law enforcement officer. Maybe if we've got anybody in law enforcement watching the audience, you can tell me why this is stupid. But I mean, so you're moving in, you know, in numbers. You're not there by yourself. You can't talk with someone, you know, it's a situation where you can't de-escalate the situation just by dialogue, you know, she's off her meds. Okay, she may pose a very real threat. I mean, it stinks. It's horrible that she's got special needs, but if she poses a threat to human life, then you do have to take action. Whether or not she's got special needs, that doesn't save someone else's life, you know. If she does truly have a knife and she stabs someone, well, that's where I'm going with this. So if you're working in numbers, why then does everyone immediately draw a gun? Can one person not pull some sort of non-lethal restraint like a taser or pepper spray, who is then backed up by another officer with a weapon that is there to escalate to lethal force if and only if non-lethal force first fails? Whenever you have cops in numbers, then you can divide that, and that's how military outfits work. One person covers the other person. You split up the way to advance, and that's how you get and you stay alive. So the same principle should apply to police work. You have one guy who's there if and only if he's needed, ready to escalate to lethal force. But in America, it seems more and more the first response, it's almost like a race to shoot. You know, everybody goes straight to lethal force, and you want to get there before your buddy does. And that's a really sad commentary on what we've seemed to accept as acceptable police work. Nick, you want to give us a Canadian perspective on this?
Yes, I very much do. So, I'm not sure if calling 911 works the same way as it does here, but up here, when you call 911, the first question you were asked is fire, ambulance, police. Is that the same way down there?
It's 911, what's your emergency usually?
No, ours is straight up fire, ambulance, police. Then they forward you, then they ask for the state of your emergency, and then they send the appropriate response. So, now maybe it varies depending on locality. Maybe the person screwed up, or maybe that is part of the repertoire somewhere. But I think that if that is the case, and that's what they asked, there's literally no reason the police should have shown up. They didn't call for the police. They called for paramedics. They told the situation. They said there might have been a knife, so maybe you send a squad car with maybe 1 or 2 cops to back up the paramedics. The police shouldn't go there and take charge of the situation and then escalate it so quickly. So never mind the fact about deadly force. They didn't even call the cops. They called for paramedics because they knew what this was. Now, as to the cops themselves, I think you guys are completely right. That, I mean, jumping to deadly force is insanity. I mean, up here we have various laws. I mean, legally as a citizen, in a violent situation, you're permitted to use reasonable force. And I mean, arguably the debate about reasonable is tossed back and forth. But I'm pretty damn sure that applies to law enforcement too. You are not allowed to go on and just shoot somebody and then later claim your life is threatened. There is a very thorough investigation following that, and when it finds out that actually in that situation at that moment there's no possible way your life would have been threatened, then you get fired and charged. So the fact that there's this automatic leap from not even wanting to be there in the first place, not even being called to be there in the first place, to then going to deadly force, and Sean's twitching like no tomorrow, so I'm thinking he's like waiting to jump in on this. But the fact that you jump from we weren't even called to be there in the first place to we're shooting this girl is it's insanity. I can't understand that. I mean, even if you don't, I mean, I understand the argument about tasers and their safety, but going from taser to gun doesn't make the situation better. It makes it worse. And there's so many other utilities they could use. Do they not have like the extendable sort of like baton sticks down there? Do they not have pepper spray that could be used? Do they not have non-violent methods of doing this? Or are some of America's police departments so cash-strapped that guns are their only possible option? I don't understand this.
It seems like today in our police force, and I'm not speaking for every single police officer, obviously, but it seems like in a lot of cases, guns seem to be the only option, and that's a problem. That's a big fucking problem.
I do want to point out one thing, and it's not really in the cops' defense. It's just about like protocol. Is if you get a 911 call and you ask for an ambulance and you say that your kid's out of control or whatever, like sending a police unit with that ambulance is not like unreasonable. Every time the fire department comes, if the firemen themselves aren't EMS, they'll send an ambulance in tandem with them. So like,
right. I think we've all.
And I just want to say I agree with that. I'm not arguing against that point.
Yeah,
it's just
we've
the fact
all
that
addressed
the cops
that.
got there first.
Right, we've all addressed that. I mean, I addressed that. Nick addressed that. And now you, Sean, you came back and also addressed that. Like, that's completely reasonable in that sort of situation. What's unreasonable is immediately the cop going to deadly force.
Well, I think we can all agree there. So we'll go ahead and close that out, and then we'll let Sean open up our next story about another recurring theme of this show about outrageous death penalty stories and whether or not they're actually outrageous. I mean, once you accept the death penalty, does it really matter how you do it? Sean's going to lead into the story. I'm going to tag on a little extra local flavor, and then I'm probably actually going to step out of the broadcast and let you guys take it from here. So, Sean, go ahead.
Okay, so rarely do we report some good news on the Social Justice Hour, but the state of Louisiana recently tried to pass a law that would have done one of two things, and they failed on both accounts. Number one, and it was H.R. 328. Number one, they wanted to sneak in a reauthorization of the electric chair because we all know, or we all should know, that the drugs that they use for lethal injection, they've been having problems getting them. So they wanted to sneak in a little reauthorization of the electric chair, and they also wanted it to make it harder for the public to learn about the drugs that they use in the lethal injection, and make it damn near impossible for the prisoner who's going to be facing the execution to figure out what's in the cocktail that he's going to be getting. And the reason that they do this is because the European company that used to supply us with the lethal injection drug has refused to do so. And they've been literally buying it off of black market pharmacies, and they don't know what's in it, they don't know the concentrations, and they're just sticking random drugs in our death row inmates. So I wanted to get everybody's opinion on this. It's good news, but it's kind of bad news because they're still trying to do this, and I will throw it to Jordan.
Yeah, so just next door or just north of Louisiana here in Arkansas, our lethal injections are in limbo because of some of the recent controversy around lethal injections and notable failures that we've covered on the show with lethal injection. However, there is because for any of our Arkansas viewers, everybody knows I like to tie these stories into local news because I love my state and I want it to get better. One of the Arkansas Attorney General hopefuls, I believe it's the Republican David Sterling, has one of the things he's running on is proposing. I forget if it's actually, you know what? Strike that name from the record. I need to do a little bit of research. We'll try to post that on YouTube when we post the clip. But there is someone running for office here in Arkansas who has a solution to the problem with our lethal injection system getting clogged up while everything gets sorted out. We've all covered how these companies out of Europe are no longer allowing or selling the drugs because they don't want them used in lethal injections. He has proposed that in Arkansas, what we do is we get a different cocktail and bar the manufacturers of that cocktail from Freedom of Information Act requests, or exempt them from Freedom of Information Act requests, because American firms have not jumped to fill the gap that these European firms have created because they get picketed and protested against. So a good small government Republican politician here in Arkansas, who's running for political office in Arkansas, wants to make it legal to kill his constituents and hide which companies are doing it and not give you a right to know. The way he described the holdover, though, to tie it all into this electric chair story, is he said that in their wisdom, Arkansas has allowed for a provision that allows the electric chair to be used whenever there's a holdup with lethal injection. We do have a fallback to the chair, which we haven't used since the early 90s. And again, the phrase he used was, in our wisdom, we set that up. So I got to find this guy's name. I'm sorry I'm blanking on it right now. But anyway, I'll let you guys take the show from here. Thank you so much for having me. Y'all have a wonderful evening. God bless.
Thank you, Jordan.
All right. So I want to go next on this one because this is always amazing to me. Now, what amazes me probably more about this story is the fact that a significant portion of Americans are still open to the notion of a death penalty. Like, this is the notion of righting a wrong with a wrong, to me, is insanity. I mean, granted, I'm not saying, like, let the most horrendous people go after their time. No. You keep them institutionalized indefinitely until the point that they're deemed safe and rehabilitated members of society. In Canada, the main principle of our justice system is not retribution, it's rehabilitation, trying to help people become productive members of society. Because everybody profits from that. You turn a horrible hardened criminal into a normal tax-paying citizen, win all around. It doesn't always work, and that's why we have life prison sentences and periods where they assess your sanity and if you can even go back out there, and when you're not deemed ready, you're sent back. So I think that's a very perfectly good way of operating. The idea of actually killing those people, like, that's horrendous. I mean, they can do the worst thing imaginable. They could kill my family. I could want them dead. That doesn't mean they should die, though. Then this is why you don't give the option up to the people who have been victims, because they're not in a rational state of mind. They are acting irrationally. They're acting out of rage and passion. They aren't thinking clearly. So to basically enable that attitude by legalizing murder and institutionalizing it. I mean, granted, they try and do flowery things like, oh, it's painless. Yeah, there's still a dead body in your room when it's done. That doesn't change. That's terrible. Regardless of what they did, it's terrible. And I can't... And I understand that even in Canada, there's a lot of people here who think would be in favor of a death penalty. It's certainly not a cut and dry issue, and there's certainly cases arguably for it, although I'm pretty sure there's no real reasonable case for it. But I'm just amazed how many people think the death penalty should be okay. It strikes me as barbaric. It strikes me as very primitive, a very crude way of solving a problem.
All right, and if you look at the countries ahead of us who, in executing their own citizens, it's like Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and like those are not the countries that you want to be on the same list of when it comes to like these kind of policies. But this isn't really a story about like the death penalty because we had the death penalty. It's a story about whether or not the government can hide what they're putting into people, like how they're executing them. And it seems ridiculous that you wouldn't be able to Freedom of Information Act request anything about the companies that produce the drug or anything like that. That is basic accountability. You should know what your government is spending your money on. And this is just a hypothetical, random, not really connected to the death penalty. But if you couldn't see what your government is buying, then they could pay like $6 billion for one vial of something, and you would never know about it. Like it's not only the death penalty issue, it's also the transparency issue. Like, why are you so afraid if this is the moral, just thing and this cocktail works perfectly and it doesn't get botched? Then why are you so afraid of us finding out what's in it and where you bought it from? Because you're buying.
John, those are great points, and the only reason I didn't go there is because I was struggling to even get there. I'm still struggling with the actual notion of the death penalty itself. So that's why I didn't meet you there on that issue. But you raised very good points, and I think you worded it quite well.
Yeah, and when it comes to to hiding the drug, first of all, like the drug cocktails that we're experimenting with now have been shown to be, I wouldn't say like ineffective, because at the end of the day they still died, but horrible at the same time. So like the going back to the Arkansas story, right, where the guy took like 20 minutes to die because his heart freaking exploded. Okay, that's you're right. That's totally barbaric. And so instead of trying to solve the problem, like, well, maybe we shouldn't have the death penalty. No, Alabama or where is it? Was it Alabama?
Louisiana.
No surprise, right? Right. So Louisiana decides, you know what? Instead of getting rid of this barbaric practice, we're just gonna hide what we're using from you, because we're just gonna hide it because we don't want people to know that we're just throwing just random stuff together. They could literally be pulling chemicals from underneath the sink and pouring it into these vials and say, I don't know, let's make it work. It'll eventually kill them. It's insanity.
Right, and the electric chair portion of it is also like terrible. The electric chair is a terrible, like, I don't believe the state should kill people. Like, I'm with Nick on this issue, but the electric chair is a terrible way to kill somebody. Like, it doesn't always work. So you just seriously cripple or injure somebody's brain, and like and you can't give somebody the electric chair twice because that's cruel and unusual punishment. But if they're injured by the electric chair, but they're like severely injured, then the state has to take care of them forever. So it's not even like the cost effectiveness. Like any angle, the electric chair is a disaster, and like it's horrible.
Is there really even a good way to kill someone?
No, there is not.
Reason. There's no good way to kill someone. There's no humane way to kill someone. Death is death.
I mean, you could do it the North Korean way, where they stand you out in the middle of the field and drop a bomb on you, if you remember that story.
Well, as some of our viewers tend to point out, we cover tabloidy stuff, and so we can't really, we just go with whatever information comes our way, from untrusted sources. We don't look into it. So apparently everything we hear from North Korea is all bullshit. So who knows, right? But I get what you're saying, and look, if they're really intent on doing this, let's go back to the Ben Mankiewicz model and say, okay, why don't we just bring back the firing squad? And I know some states have already actually added that and said, okay, yeah, maybe we should go back to that. Because if you're determined to kill somebody, I guess that's the most cost-effective way to do it.
Okay, I have to jump in on this one because this reminds me of what's his name? Irishman wrote a modest proposal. So he's a very I forget his name. It's gonna bother me. But anyway, so a modest proposal. The premise is he's proposing that there's this whole poverty thing in Ireland right now. There's so many people there, and they don't have food, so they have all these kids. Well, why don't they just have babies, grow them to a certain age, and then eat them? I mean, like, it seems like a modest thing. Now, the whole point of that is, and the reason it's satirical, is because the point is that people in England and other places will read that and go, oh, that's abhorrent. But the point there is, it's abhorrent, yet you seem to think that the Irishman is a second-class citizen and barely human. So if you're going to make that statement, why don't you just take it a step further? Unless you don't think they're not people, you are just using it as a justification to keep them down. And the reason this reminds me of that is the notion of not letting people see the execution and trying to hide the cocktail. It's like, oh, we think these people deserve death, yet we can't be man or woman or ballsy or brave enough to look at it while we do this, while we okay it. So the answer to me is, deep down, none of you think this is okay. Not one of you. Because if you did, you would sit there and watch it and leave with not a free conscience because you knew that that was the right thing to do. The fact that these people think it's okay to hide this, or that the execution thing is wrong, or the firing squad thing is wrong, and I know why they think it's wrong, because it's been proven in the Second World War that through the Einsatz group and the groups that went through and were of the regular German army that required to actually use firing squads on Jews, they left mentally horrendously scarred. Their morale was down. They were just shut down. They couldn't operate. So we know why it doesn't work, because those people have consciences and they feel horrendous doing it. And this is just part of the problem, is you're trying to hide it to avoid the issue, but you know it's wrong. Deep down, you all do.
And they try to hide this issue because they know that when people see it, they're going to react that way and say, look, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're fucking mental. We're allowing the state to kill people for doing something wrong to deter other people from also doing something wrong.
Right. And like don't get like us confused. Like I'm sure like there might even be pro death penalty people in our audience who are like execution junkies, because people can go to executions. Like, some people want to see it, but most people, and the people in power, the politicians, they don't want anybody to see it, because they know if that aired on TV or whatever, like, that's a human life being taken by the state. Like, it's not moral, it's not justified, it's not anything. I got one more point. And if you are in a firing squad, I know they say that the bullet is random, whoever gets the bullet, but if you're the one black guy in the firing squad, you bet your damn life that they put that bullet in your gun, because the death penalty is racist.
I sort of want to counter one thing that you might have said. I think one of the reasons that they do kind of keep, or at least I heard or read somewhere, that traditionally, like back in the past, they would hold like picnics and shit for executions, for hangings, and people loved it.
No, it's not just that. There were postcards from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, literally of the picture, and the whole town is gathered for this lynching, and they're all posing around it like this is a normal thing. If that's what you think is moral, that execution is moral, then they were at least ballsy enough to stand up there and say, I'm going to be on a commercial product because I think this is so moral. Okay? So if you are pro-death penalty, you should not be afraid to show it by being there either participating in the execution or being brave enough to watch it. Because if you aren't, then you are not true to your convictions. You don't think it's right because you can't bear to watch it, because you recognize deep down that is a human life that is being extinguished, and you can't bear to see it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they could be totally in favor of it, right? Like, they could be in favor of the death penalty. They could probably want people to see it, but they're so protective of the death penalty. Like, yeah, public lynchings, like, there were in events. Like, I called it a lynchnik earlier because I'm a jerk. But, like, there were events where people would take their kids and they would eat and party and, like, all that. But when Emmett Till was killed, like, and people saw his face because his mom, like, courageously had an open casket funeral, like, that shocked people when they saw that they did that to a boy. So, like, eventually, like, sure, there are like savages, like, and I'm saying savages in America that would love the execution. Like, I'm not trying to make a racial point. Like, white people, savages in America, like, those are the people in favor of the death penalty. That would love to see this and all that, but they know that the rest of us aren't gonna like that, and the rest of us, like, we could rally around an image, a disgusting image of somebody's like I hate to be super gruesome, but when you get the electric chair, your eyes explode in your head. Like, it's horrible. There's a reason they cover your face. So, like, that's why they don't show it. Like, even if they like it personally, they're like, they have the self-awareness to know that once that image is out there and this is what the U.S. government does, like, the death penalty won't be long in this country.
Right. They have the awareness to recognize that most people don't share that view. That most people, even if they say they're in favor of the death penalty, will see it and go, "That is horrendous."
All right, guys. That's a good, pretty good place to end this on.
Well, no, I got one final point. I just thought of this. If you're really in favor of the death penalty, then let's make it like jury duty. The person who pulls the trigger is randomly selected from the citizen. That's the person who pulls the switch. See how much people will be in favor of it then.
Amen to that.
Yeah, let's see how many people, and I'm sure they'll get some takers, but I think most people will not be in favor of it.
No, make it random, not voluntary. Make it random like jury duty.
That's what I'm saying, though. So some people might still be in favor of that, but most people won't be.
And everyone else will learn not to associate with those people anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good side effect, I guess. But man, I just gotta say, I think right now in America we're still kind of collectively insane, and I think we need to move away from that. All right, that's pretty much all we had for tonight. Like I said, short show, not a whole lot of stuff going on for us right now. So that we're done with the broadcast. We'll see you, of course, next Thursday here on TYT Community for the News and Politics Hour. Thank you to our host, Jordan French, for taking time out of his day to step in for Rhiannon while she's away. We really appreciate Jordan. So you'll, of course, see us later on. See Jordan later on, probably next Thursday or so. 9 p.m. Eastern here on TYT Nation. Make sure to subscribe, youtube.com/TYT Nation, facebook.com/TYT Nation. If you want to be on the panel, send us a message to our Facebook page, or you can send me an email or a tweet. Tweet me at Jeff's Politics, or, of course, email me at jeffw@tytnetwork.com if you want to be on the show. We're always happy to have new people. And, of course, I want to thank our patrons for supporting the show with your donations, with your monthly donations. We really appreciate you guys. This is how we keep the show going and keeps us independent. We really appreciate that. So, from here in Michigan and here at TYT Community, we hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. I'm Jeff Waldorf. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Nick, for joining me, and we will see you next week. You guys take care.
Later.
Bye-bye.